In 2007, one phone ruled Wall Street. It was called BlackBerry. Then Steve Jobs pulled a glass rectangle from his pocket and changed the rules of the game. BlackBerry saw it coming. They just refused to believe it. This is the Noir ledger.
Part 1. The phone that owned power.
Long before the iPhone ruled the modern world, a BlackBerry was so much more than just a phone. It was a statement of status. If you owned a BlackBerry in the early 2000s, you were important. Someone needed your input, and your inbox had followed you from the boardroom to the back seat of a cab at 3 a.m. Bankers clung to their BlackBerries like weapons. Attorneys typed out memos on their BlackBerries in meetings. Politicians used BlackBerries on the campaign trail. This was no casual device. BlackBerry's tiny keyboard, notorious for its physical clicks and clicks, allowed users to bang out rapid-fire emails that made their contemporaries feel slow. They were built for those who believed that time was money, and no email should go unanswered. That little device spoke of an urgent importance that no consumer electronics device has been able to replicate since. Research in Motion, the Canadian company behind the phone, was founded by engineer Mike Lazaridis and business dealmaker Jim Balsillie. Lazaridis was the brains behind the technology. Balsillie was the powerhouse driving the company's ambitious expansion. The duo developed a rare product, a tech device that corporations felt they could rely on. In the world of business, trust trumps almost everything. Companies craved security and efficiency over slick aesthetics, and for years, BlackBerry delivered on both. Their powerful servers, robust battery life, and superior email platform put the company at the top. By the mid-aughts, BlackBerry had become the de facto accessory for anyone of significance. Heads of state, chief executives, high-flying traders, all were tethered to their Crackberry, a nickname derived from the addiction it induced. President Barack Obama famously made headlines by refusing to part with his BlackBerry when he entered office. BlackBerry seemed to have it all: a devoted customer base, sky-high profit margins, a brand that commanded respect, and a device that consumers craved to the point of dependency. Yet, that success harbored a significant vulnerability. BlackBerry had masterfully designed the ultimate tool for one very specific world: the world of business correspondence. As the world shifted and customers began clamoring for more than just a hyper-efficient inbox, BlackBerry was slow to adapt, leaving it ill-equipped to compete with devices offering a more holistic digital experience. The next evolution of the mobile world had arrived, and the BlackBerry, for all its power and prestige, wasn't quite ready to meet it.
Part 2. The empire behind the keyboard.
BlackBerry's greatest strength became its prison. The company was convinced that the keyboard was magical. In BlackBerry's mind, the keyboard wasn't a feature. It was the product's soul. Customers loved it. Corporations demanded it. Executives swore by it. And inside BlackBerry, the loyalty it had built convinced it that the future would be very much like the past. That's where great companies often get off track. Failure doesn't always begin with weakness. Sometimes it begins with a product that works too well. BlackBerry was making money. Its phones were revered. Its brand was aspirational. So when new ideas were presented, BlackBerry viewed them through the lens of its existing success. Could you actually get work done without a physical keyboard? Would executives and business people actually type on glass? Would corporate email be safe on a consumer device? To BlackBerry, the answer to these questions was no, no, and definitely no. But beyond corporate walls, a different kind of audience was awakening. Ordinary people were beginning to have expectations for what a mobile phone could be. They wanted cameras, music, a full web experience, bigger displays, a sleeker look and feel. BlackBerry viewed the phone as a tool to facilitate communication. Apple viewed the phone as a pocket computer. That distinction might sound small. It was monumental. Research in Motion had the engineering talent. It had the cash. It had the distribution network. It had the carrier relationships. It had millions of fiercely loyal users. But it also had a culture obsessed with efficiency, security, and email. Apple had a culture obsessed with experience. BlackBerry was optimized to deliver what the corporate world asked for. Apple was optimized to deliver what the public didn't yet know they wanted. This is the most dangerous type of competitor to contend with, because it doesn't attack where you're strongest. It changes what strength means. BlackBerry could say, "Our battery life is better." Apple could say, "Look at that gorgeous screen." BlackBerry could say, "Our keyboard is the most efficient." Apple could say, "Look at this amazing web browsing." BlackBerry could say, "Businesses rely on us." Apple could say, "Consumers love us." Over time, those happy consumers started bringing their personal love of devices into the workplace. The great corporate IT firewall began to erode as employees demanded access for their iPhones, Androids, and apps. BlackBerry was designed to operate in a world where IT departments were king. It was now operating in a world where employees were. For a company whose power was built on controlling the system, this change was terrifying. But the true horror still had not arrived. It was sitting on a stage in San Francisco.
Part 3. Steve Jobs changes the rules.
Back in 2007, on January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs strode across the Macworld stage and introduced 3 new products. A widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary new mobile phone, and a groundbreaking new internet device. Then he smiled. "These are not 3 separate devices," he announced. "These are one device." He called it the iPhone. And the crowd knew immediately that things had changed. The phone had a large, glass screen. It had no physical keyboard. It responded to multi-touch gestures. It actually displayed websites like websites. To consumers it looked like magic. To BlackBerry it looked like a joke. Back at Research in Motion RIM, BlackBerry's parent company, execs apparently thought it impossible that Apple could deliver on what Jobs claimed. Could a device really run for an entire day on a single charge? Could the mobile networks handle it? Would anyone really want to type on a sheet of glass? Their skepticism was understandable to some degree. The first iPhone was hardly perfect. It launched without 3G, an app store, or a cheap price point. It was far more suited for consumers than for business users. BlackBerry was still king in the enterprise world. It still had the keyboard, the network carriers, and more importantly, the trust of millions. So the company made what dominant market leaders often do when facing a disruptive new entrant. They treated the initial version as the entire threat, not as the first step. Instead of asking, "What's the worst this could become?" they asked, "What is the worst about it right now?" This was a catastrophic mistake. Apple wasn't just releasing a phone, it was charting a new direction. The full-screen device could be refined year over year. Software could get better. New apps could broaden its functionality. The touchscreen would become the norm. Battery life would improve. Networks would get faster. The first iPhone was merely an opening statement, not the closing argument. BlackBerry saw the absence of a keyboard and interpreted it as a vulnerability. Apple saw the screen and envisioned limitless potential. And with the release of the App Store in 2008, the landscape shifted again. The phone was no longer just a phone, it was a platform. Developers could build games, maps, banking and social applications, productivity software, and indeed, entire businesses on top of the iPhone operating system. While BlackBerry offered an inbox email client, Apple developed an ecosystem of apps. That word is overused today, but it's essential to this story. Once users invested their photos, music, contacts, and their entire digital lives into iPhone apps, services, and device, in other words, into their personal digital world, it was much harder to switch. BlackBerry once ruled the inbox. Apple would soon begin to rule the user. And a user is a much bigger market.
Part 4. The wrong response.
The company didn't entirely dismiss the iPhone, however. That's the thing. It tried to respond. But it responded as if defending the past rather than building for the future. In 2008, BlackBerry launched the Storm, the first significant touchscreen competitor to the iPhone. On paper, it was the dream answer. It was a touchscreen BlackBerry. A phone that could stand against the iPhone and maintain BlackBerry's prestige. But the Storm turned into an ominous omen. Instead of a seamless touchscreen experience, BlackBerry's solution was to try and mimic a tactile key by making the entire screen click down when pressed. The idea was to give you that button typing sensation, and the effect was entirely jarring and clumsy. The software was buggy and frustrating. And next to the iPhone, it felt like a compromised answer from a company not fully committed to what it was making. This is one of the most ruthless games in business. You can't beat a new category by grudgingly adopting bits of it. You have to understand why it's winning. BlackBerry spent years trying to hold on to the keyboard era, bolting on bits of the touch era around it. Apple just moved on. Android moved on too. Google gave other hardware manufacturers a free and powerful mobile operating system, and suddenly BlackBerry wasn't fighting a single competitor. It was fighting a whole new world. Samsung, HTC, Motorola, and countless others jumped on the touchscreen smartphone movement, filling every possible niche and price point. Carriers got new choices, consumers got new choices, and developers get new, better platforms. And one by one, BlackBerry's unique advantages started to erode. The secure email was great, but email was no longer everything. The The keyboard was beloved, but fewer and fewer considered it a necessity. Corporate relationships were valuable, but employees were now bringing their own devices to work. The world wasn't asking, what phone is the best for email? The world was asking, what phone can do everything? BlackBerry struggled to answer that question. Eventually, BlackBerry released a modern OS, BlackBerry 10, but by that point the playing field had been completely reset. Apple and Android had years of lead time. Developers weren't targeting BlackBerry first. Customers weren't waiting for BlackBerry. The brand that defined mobile productivity for an entire decade was now trying to convince the world it still belonged in the game. In tech, once the world stops waiting, catching up is impossibly expensive. BlackBerry didn't fail out of lack of intelligence. It failed out of an underestimation of the pace of behavioral change.
Part 5. The company that lost the future.
BlackBerry didn't crumble overnight. That's what makes the story all the more painful. For a while, the company still appeared to be in rude health from the outside. Millions of people still carried and used the devices. Governments still trusted the encryption on them. Chief executives still hammered out emails on the keyboards. The brand still carried weight. Yet, the future had already left. The numbers ultimately caught up. BlackBerry's market share began to tumble. The stock price, once stratospheric, collapsed. The devices faded from cultural view. The company that once seemed beyond all competition was turned into an object lesson of what happens when leadership mistakes familiarity for durability. Because a company can be beloved and abandoned. A company can be admired for its features and eventually discarded. A company can be relied upon for years and then forsaken in a single stroke. BlackBerry built an empire on a singular, groundbreaking concept. A device that reliably secured and delivered email while on the move. Steve Jobs, however, gave us the Apple iPhone, a product that dramatically reshaped the concept of the telephone, transforming it into a multifaceted device for nearly every aspect of our digital lives: a camera, a map, a media player, a gaming system, a browser, a wallet, a social network, and even the command center for modern living. Once this new, expanded definition gained widespread acceptance, the old empire that BlackBerry inhabited suddenly became far too small. While the company still exists today, it has transformed itself, abandoning the phone-making business to focus on software, cybersecurity, and services. It has in many ways returned to what it always understood best: security and reliable systems. But the cultural leadership it once wielded, the dominance of the keyboard and the era of enterprise-first communication, ended with the rise of the sleek glass rectangle. This is more than a story of Apple's brilliance versus BlackBerry's folly. The truth is more profound. BlackBerry's success was driven by genuine strengths. Its product addressed a genuine need, its customer base was authentic, its competitive advantage real, and its brand strong. Yet, success in business can, unfortunately, blind you to the future even as it cements you in the present. The very attributes that made BlackBerry triumphant ultimately proved to be the source of its undoing. The keyboard. The enterprise-centric approach. The conviction that functional superiority would always be valued over user experience. That is, until the day Steve Jobs presented the world with a device that fundamentally reimagined what a phone was for, making user experience the primary function. This is the Noir ledger, where every empire has a trail of evidence, and every leader ultimately faces the inexorable currents of the future.